And good morning and welcome to the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services for Monday, November 4th, 2024. My name is City Councillor Vivian Santos of the Point Douglas Ward. I will be your chairperson. I have Councillor Ross Eady from the Mynarski Ward who is joining us. And from our Winnipeg Public Service, I have the Senior Committee Clerk, Mr. Peter Prinsloo, and of course, some other members from the administration here who will be presenting on a number of agenda items we have today. We are also, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on Treaty Number 1 territory, the home and the traditional homelands of the Red River Métis that we have the privilege of living on. I also acknowledge that we are meeting on ancestral territorial lands and our water comes from Shoal Lake Band Number 40 in Treaty 3, together with our neighbors in Treaty Number 5, where our hydroelectricity comes from. I believe we have a couple of motions that we require. Please, Councillor Eady.
Madam Chairperson, first I'd like to move a motion to allow for Councillor Wyatt to be off on personal business.
Sure. All those in favor?
Aye. And I'll move that the minutes of the meeting held on October 1st, 2024 be taken as read.
All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's carried. Okay, we will move on into delegations. Peter, if you can walk us through that.
Absolutely. First up, joining us via Zoom, we have Mr. David Grant, who is to be heard in support of proactive cleanup of needle debris and weapons in city parks, which is report 8, and in opposition to Winnipeg Police Service 2023 Statement of Revenues and Expenses, which is report 3. So David, if you want to go ahead, start your video, unmute your mic, you'll have up to 10 minutes to make your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, it took a little while. Thank you. I think we're ready now.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. It'd be nice to have the unmuting stuff done before I'm called for, but this is the way it is. Anyway, topic 3, revenues that WPS has not elaborated. In the report purporting to explain income and expenses, the only mention of income fits on 4 lines with only 4 numbers. Failure to explain complex issues in financial reports has resulted in rejection of such summaries by boards and reviewers. Your SBC should not vote to accept any report that hides crucial info in this way. It is said that a big company was hired to approve this report, and yet they failed to note the lack of transparency. I was at a board meeting a couple of years ago, and one of the board members refused to approve the budget because it had a very large fraction of the organization's expenditures on a single line. That was all. Anyway, on the topic of needles, this is not a new issue, as you're aware. I think I've spoken here about this before. Simply picking up needles through the workday will not really protect children or pets. Some of these things will be missed by the team. It is clear to most folks that wildlife and pet droppings not picked up are not compatible with use of that land by small children. We see that in our parks this time of year when there are hundreds of geese eating grass and leaving landmines for us. The occupation of land by IV drug users is also incompatible with use of that land by small children. Until we can exclude those users 24/7, no public land will be safe for children. Using good fences and other forms of deterrence to protect child-friendly plots, small plots of land, should be considered. It has long been suggested that needles not be given out as freely as in the past. These programs grew out of needle exchanges. Under such a system, most or all needles are safely collected and exchanged at minimal cost to the city. Until authorities develop the will to act in this way, our public spaces will remain too dangerous for use by the very young and the differently abled. I am reminded that our health authorities introduced needle trade-ins to prevent the spread of disease. Even then, they had no data to support what may have been myths. Since growing IV drug use is making life in Winnipeg less safe, perhaps it is time for our health authorities to provide actual data on these programs and their effect on health. Back then, Winnipeg health authorities claimed that more than 99% of needles were safely collected by those who handed them out. In this 2024 report, we learn that, quotes, Street Connections report their needle collection service is not very effective, quotes. Perhaps you should ask what happened. If the collection rate went from 99% to 10%, please ask why. Are only 10% of sharps now returned? We don't know. WRHA seems afraid to actually measure this rate.
Right.
Are users suddenly not socially responsible anymore? Were they ever? Do caregivers care less now about the return rate? If the rate had been 10% all along, perhaps you should ask WRHA to explain all their misleading and dubious numbers from a few years ago. If the 99% return rate was not a lie, how do we get back to that rate? Before you ask taxpayers to pay for teams to comb through all the public spaces, remember that they will never be close to 100% effective. Spaces occupied by careless needle users can never be safe hours later for the vulnerable. We can still imagine that after the team has been through and picked up hundreds of needles, there'll still be one or two, and some little kid could be injured from that. Please consider a pilot program to keep a few public spaces free from those who use intravenous drugs. Such spaces would be much safer than those simply monitored for sharps. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David. I do have a question.
Yes.
You had mentioned you saw somewhere online that WRHA had 100% or 99% rate of pickup. Could you clarify that?
Yes, that was in 2018, and that was in some FIPA requests to WRHA, and then subsequently the attempts to get actual numbers from them got responses like, we can't count all the needles. Well, they're returned to them in safe packages, you know, the sharps containers. And back when I worked with needles all the time in a lab, we put we had solvent bottles, gallon glass bottles, and we just put our sharps in there so that nobody had to touch them again. They couldn't poke out. But as far as the counting of the needles returned, the one simple way is, you know how much 100 needles weigh. If you have a sharps container and empty it weighed 800 grams, and when it's returned to you it weighed 1800 grams, you have a kilogram of needles in it, and that tells you a return rate. So if we wanted to, we could know the actual return rate right now, but that was the claim back then, that it was less than 1%. I think in those days it was something like 10,000 needles on the streets, and that was said to be less than 1% of those distributed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Eady, go ahead.
You were saying that in that report that it was 99% picked up by the same. I believe you said the people who were delivering the needles. Is that correct, or did they mean the organization?
No, they meant the return rate, that they were returning the number not returned to the distributor. So the person who is handing them out gets all but less than 1% not returned. So that was the claim at the time.
Well, that's what I'm getting at. So the individuals handing out sterilized, clean needles, the way you express it, it sounds like those people giving out the needles and whatever other safe drug usage apparatus. So they're saying that they collected it in 2018? This is what
Or
did they say that a whole bunch of people, like the Bear Clan and other people, were out there picking up the needles because they only had containers at certain spots which they emptied out, but they weren't collecting any needles discarded in parks, streets, wherever, back lanes?
This was the WRHA asking how many were, because the program back in the last decade was an exchange program that you got one and returned many. But when it was an exchange program, the WRHA in a FIPA response said that the number not returned to the authorities, like Street Connections, the number not returned handed over in containers, the number was less than 1% of those given out. And one other quote from them was that the number returned sometimes exceeds the number given out. And those are very convincing. It sounded like we weren't going to have a problem with littered lawns, but those are the two data points. And since then, WHA has been, we could say, somewhat resistant to actually publishing data.
Right, yeah, okay, so,
Second question.
yeah, anyway, it seems to me in 2018, they did have those, containers where people could put their used needles in. I don't recall it ever having a direct exchange back when they picked up, but if that's what's happening, that would have been pre-2018, like long before 2018. Are you also aware that the city now in various neighborhoods where we have garbage dumped into back lanes and stuff, we have a program, but a lot of times the length of time required for them to come and clean up the abandoned waste, it's delayed because there's needles there and the contractor won't clean up any garbage where needles exist. So they have to call in somebody to clean those up. Are you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of that directly, but it makes sense. We know that when you're trying to clean up the debris from a burned out building, if somebody says there's asbestos, suddenly the work has to stop. So it makes sense that if there are needles and a scrap mattress, that's an impediment to getting rid of it. And I've spoken also on the topic of dead mattresses because I feel that we should be much more proactive in collecting them because they are bad for the neighborhood. And
I'm not getting into the garbage. I'm just saying
Yep.
it's stalled out because needles exist. And
Yep.
perspective on the concept that you have groups like Bizes who have green team workers. We train them how to pick up needles, and they pick up needles. That's work. So, what do you think about that? So, neighborhood groups, it's okay for a volunteer for the Bear Clan to pick up needles. People who are hired to deal with garbage won't touch them. Kind of ironic.
yeah, and especially if we can take a green team, which is not professional waste collecting people, if we can train them to safely do the job, and yet we have we're not able to get our people who are trained in picking up bad mattresses and so on, they should be trainable in being able to use proper tools to pick up and deal with these things, just like they would for other forms of excrement or pet waste or whatever that might be in their workspace. I would expect, like back when I worked in public works in Ontario, we were expected to do whatever it took to get the job done, even if it was new and different. We just had to do it safely. So I would expect that somebody whose job is to pick up a dead mattress in an alley should be able to safely handle sharps or excrement or anything else they find in the area that is getting in the way of the mattress job, without running away, because it'd be nice to have the job done. But the main thing I was trying to stress here was that while we can have green teams and we can have a dedicated sharps team, that when you have an area with hundreds of sharps in it, in a grassy area, and we send a team through, I wouldn't want my little grandkid walking in that grass, playing in that grass, because of the chances that the good team has missed a couple. And I think having a clean space for a daycare would be very useful. And perhaps we should do a pilot on an area that doesn't get sharps every night.
All right, thank you, Mr. Grant. That one you expressed several times, so thanks for your presentation and.
Thank you, Councillor Edie. Thank you, David, for your presentation.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, up next.
Next up, we have Joseph Faree, Singing Red Bear Foundation, Inc., to be heard in opposition to proactive cleanup of needle debris and weapons in city parks, which is reported. You could just grab a
Yeah,
seat.
right at the very end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm kind of a little nervous here. It's the first time addressing committee. It's been noted that I am founder of the Singing Red Bear Foundation, creator of the No Thanks, I'm Good campaign, after the death of my son from being poisoned by fentanyl. But I'm here today to speak as a citizen, and especially to that fact that the city of Winnipeg is considering paying for the cleanup. David was talking about the past when the needle exchange program was first initiated. And I'm going to refer to an article that was released by CBC News in 2004, where the Center for Addiction and Mental Health looked into several surveys. And at that time, when they were trying to get the needle exchange program initiated, they were going to ensure that, one, we wouldn't reduce the disease from IV users, and it would not increase the injection use. And the one that I really found was that it would not increase the number of discarded needles. And here we are 20 years later discussing discarded needles and the danger it poses to our community. I'm a firm believer in harm reduction. I'm in recovery for 5 years. I'm a former heroin addict, a former injection user. And I think harm reduction, Manitoba harm reduction, has to take responsibility in where we find ourselves today. And I don't think it's fair to the citizens of Winnipeg to have to pay for the cleanup. I've been involved in needles for a long time in my life. And I remember a day where I couldn't get one needle unless I brought another needle back. And somewhere along the line, we've gotten away from that. I think that, in order for us to dig ourselves out of this, the province has to be heavily involved. We have Swan River right now who's passed a motion to not allow harm reduction to hand out needles in their community because there's so many. Obviously, we can't do that. We're in the midst of a crisis. But I think and firmly believe that Manitoba has to play a role in the cleanup. We've distributed probably over the last 20 years, I would guess over 1 million needles to users. And we have gotten away from that collection and the needle exchange and what the real meaning of the needle exchange program was all about. You say, the speaker before me, have users gotten less responsible? Well, I think, and I'm speaking as a former user, that if I'm going to get stuff for free, then the old stuff is not of value. We need to make the old needles of value to the users, because as a user, the number one thing that I live for every day is to use. So my paraphernalia is very important to me. Now, if I can't get the paraphernalia because I don't have anything to exchange it for, then the old needles become valuable. And we need to get back to that. I understand that we're in the midst of a crisis. We're in the midst of unsafe places right now because harm reduction, and I'm going to use the word, failed us as community members. Because harm reduction, in my mind, should include the community. It should make it safe for us as well, not just the user to use. I understand addiction. I understand it very well, but I also understand the importance of keeping our communities safe and our places safe and our children safe. And I think this is a question that we need to take back to the province. They just invested $2.7 million in the safe injection site here in Winnipeg. Part of that money needs to be included in the cleanup of the mess that harm reduction had made over the past of freely giving out these needles and not expecting anything in return, looking to community volunteers to pick up the mess, which I think is unfair. I firmly believe that if we're going to do this, then we need to do it right in a manner that's safe for my children, for your children, and for the user until we can get them a place where they can become non-users in recovery. So I don't think, Winnipeg, our city should be paying for the cleanup. I think that there's a better way that we need to explore. If it's just for a one-time immediate, let's get these things off the street. But as this previous speaker said before, they'll just be back. So we need to really start negotiating with Manitoba Harm Reduction on a plan and get back to the real nature of what the needle exchange program was initiated back in 1989. It was 1 for 1. You want 5 needles, you bring me 5 dirty needles. Then those dirty needles become valuable to the user because they're not going to get any more unless they have those. I know as a former user, I had a kit. I carried it around with me. I made sure that kit was safe because without it, then I can't use. So we value, as users, we value different things. And our paraphernalia and our ability to keep ourselves using, that's important. So right now, the dirty needles aren't important because I can walk into any health aid care center and get a bag of 25 and not have to bring anything back. And to me, it's, now that I'm in a different place, it boggles my mind that we're allowing this to happen. Because at the end of the day, it's the community now that's being unsafe. And we need to get back what real harm reduction is about, not just for the user, but for the community itself. And thank you for giving me this opportunity to share a little bit of what I know and how I feel about this.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have some questions. Go ahead, Councillor Eady.
Thank you for presenting what the underlying problem is, which I totally agree with you. Do you know when they actually changed the practice of the exchanging 1 for 1?
I think it would it's part of the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, they kind of shifted away from that in 2019. So for the last 5 years, it's pretty much been a free for all. I got out of drug use in 2019, and I know I could go into any place where harm reduction was available and get cleans. We call them cleans. And I remember the shift where I didn't have to bring. I would always bring some back, and then it was after a while. Well, I don't need these anymore, and we would discard them because we knew we could get more. So that shifted. I think it was part of the pandemic. I know HIV and Hep C was on the rise. I know that's the reasons now they use for the needle distribution. I call it needle distribution because there is no more exchange. So we need to get back to that exchange rate. And I think this is a conversation that we need to have, and municipalities all across Manitoba need to have with the province and saying, listen, harm reduction is part of the problem here.
Yeah, I'm supportive of harm reduction too. So when the Bear Clan formulated and started up back around 2014, 15, around in there, 16, 15, there were constant need to pick up like lots of needles. Like there were lots of needles just discarded. And I got a lot of calls through my office about these problems. And I had a direct line to the Bear Clan or whatever to help try to get the needles cleaned up. Was there at that point, so I'm going pre-2018, pre-COVID. Was there anywhere else that people could source like a lot of needles? Because there was some places where there was a lot of needles.
Well, I think at that point, we were buying them if we could get them from pharmacies. They were being sold in pharmacies in packages of 50, 100, I think, at a time. And we didn't have the clinics at the time. We had, I can't remember the correct words. We were just going to health aid. It wasn't quite harm reduction at that time, but it was the early formulation of harm reduction because in 1989, they started the needle exchange program. So there was the concept of the needle exchange to give out because of AIDS. And then, so what's the word I'm looking for? Health provider and agencies would be handing out these needles, but it was always on the belief system that you would bring back and it would be an exchange. So they'd have a sharps container there. How many needles do you have? Oh, I have 10. You'd put those 10 in the sharps container, then you'd get 10 clean. And then as a user, we are responsible, but we value different things.
You have rights and responsibilities, right?
Yeah, we have, we do try to keep ourselves as clean as possible. But if you're just gonna give me stuff, then the value of the dirties lose its the value, and I'm not gonna keep them because I'm just gonna get clean ones. So I think again, this is a problem that needs to go have the province included in it and help parts, because this is not just Winnipeg, this is all of Manitoba that's having this issue.
The irony about what you're saying is, so the liquor commissions are selling all these cans and bottles and stuff that you can't return. They're just discarded. Got to put a value on that too, to make things look clean. So,
I mean, we can look to Alberta and their recycling program and they add 5 cents for everything sold, and then you bring it back and you get your 5 cents back. I mean, it's all about how we create value in something if we want to clean something up. And I think that's the question here. The underlying question is Manitoba harm reduction has kind of failed the people of Manitoba and created this thing that we find ourselves in now. I'm all for harm reduction. I know we have addiction issues, but I think there needs to be a better way that we're doing this, because what we're doing in the last 10 years is failing us.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Joseph, and just to, I'm learning that, are you aware? So I can pose the question, are you aware, Manitoba Health is actually issuing millions of needles in Winnipeg alone?
I believe it. I believe it. And the unfortunate part of that is we're not establishing a collecting area. And we need to get back to what, the initial concept of the needle exchange program was 1 for 1. And if we can get back to that, we can eliminate and get back to what the gentleman said before, to almost 99-100% return rate. And we need to start putting some responsibility on the user.
And more of a balanced approach.
More
would
balanced
you say
approach.
is the better approach, the balanced approach, as opposed to just continuing to hand out needles without anything afterwards.
And the bottom line, I don't think it's fair to the citizens of Winnipeg to have to pay for the cleanup. I know it's needed. The cleanup is needed. There is no question. I'm not denying that. But is it fair, to our taxpayers to have to pay for that when it's Manitoba harm reduction that got us into it?
Those are all the questions I have. Thank you for coming out. It's a heavy conversation, but I appreciate you coming out and sharing your story, Joseph, and we'll deal with the matter as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, do we have any other people registered to speak? Nobody else? Okay, so we can go straight into
reports.
All right. Let's go to item number 1, Winnipeg Hoarding and Collecting Behaviors Task Force. I believe we have members from the Winnipeg Fire Paramedics. I see Chief Schmidt, I see Gilmore, and your name escapes me? Sherry Reach. Sherry Reach. Thank you for coming.
I think they have other reports, but
Yeah.
Madam Chairperson.
Yes.
We're very familiar with the hoarding, and it'd be good to know how things are going. But this is simply a request for an extension of 60
Correct.
days.
Correct, yes.
So maybe to save time, I would just move to grant the extension for
Extension?
them to
Okay.
prepare a proper report.
Unless the chief has anything to say, any updates?
No, that's
No?
great. If we
That's
can get the extension,
Okay.
historically, this was a verbal report. Last year it was moved to written, so as noted, we're looking for the 60 days.
Okay, up to 60 days?
Yes.
Okay, so moved by Counselor Edie. All those in favor?
Uh,
That's carried. moving on to number 2, annual inspection of converted residential dwellings with shared facilities for the year of 2023.
So this is a yearly report, quite a history on this. We began reporting on this item in November of or after the meeting of November 2016. Just a few points of interest, and then we can take any questions you may have, but you'll note that on page 3 of the report, it's identified that we have exceeded our targeted inspections in the year of 2023. And as well, there is a summary of the calls that have come in regarding CRDs through 311. In 2023, fire prevention had 12 complaints routed to them from 311 regarding CRDs. The licensing and bylaw enforcement received 53 complaints through 311, and the planning and property and development enforcement services unit received 127 complaints. The report also outlines the areas throughout the city where those complaints were generated. I'll ask Director Leash if she has anything further to add, or Chief Gilmore, and then we can take your questions.
Nothing further. I have nothing further. Oh, you don't have anything more to add? I do have one question, but if you want to go ahead, Councillor Edie.
I do have a question. Just compliance on this is through 23. Was it better than 22?
Compliance rates for the shared facilities, sorry, go ahead. We're down a little bit on the first inspection, so 43% were compliant on the first inspection for the shared facilities this year, and last year 36% was that number. So the first inspection was not met with compliance. That rate is a little bit higher for 2023, but that number bounces around year to year between 35% and 46%. So it's not out of the realm of normal since the report has been in place. With respect to your table 1, inspections completed by fire prevention, table 1 reports the number of inspections conducted. You have the list here was requirement, annual target, number inspected, but then there's also the percentage of compliant on the first 32%, and then compliant on second inspection 68%. Is that can you explain that number for me? It was quite confusing when I was reading that. Sure. So this is the same format as previous years, but just to clarify, when we go to the first inspection, so the CRDs with shared facilities are required to be conducted annually. So we set up the appointment, we go and inspect, and on that first inspection, 32% of the time in 2023, there were no violations found. And then when we set up the reinspection, we go back, everything is compliant. 68% of the time that was the case. So for the first 2 inspections, almost 100% of the time we have compliance. On the reinspection, there are a few occasions, less than 1%, where we've had to go back again after that first reinspection. After the second inspection. Correct.
So 68% of the 30. Hold on. 68% of the non-compliant after first inspection are the ones that are right, because 32% were compliant, right?
32% of the time we didn't have to go back. And then for the rest of them, most of the time we had to go back. Okay, good. Thank you.
I'll move the receipt of this report as information.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edie. All those in favor?
Aye.
Right, and that's carried. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Ernest, this item does proceed up to council as well.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. All right, moving on to the Winnipeg Police Service 2023 Statement of Revenue and Expenses. Police Board 2023 Summary of Expenses and Police Board 2023 Annual Report I believe we do have someone from the police board, Miss Geist.
Kist.
Kist.
Hi,
Kist.
Counselor Edie.
To make a presentation. Thank you for coming.
Who's that? Sorry.
It's Gwen.
Oh, good, oh, good.
Okay, so for the first two items, per the City of Winnipeg bylaws, these are required, annual audited financial statements or summaries. And they are to go to the Standing Policy Committee on Community Services, which is this today. So a bit of an explanation. The Q4 financial reports for the year ending December 31st, 2023 were presented to the board at its public meeting on March 8th. And the SBC Finance and Economic Development at its public meeting on April 15th. The report is available on DMIS, or the city's decision-making information system, within the agenda of both those meetings. And page 9 of that report provides a summary of the considerations for 2023. And that's something that Mr. Grant had alluded to, that there wasn't any transparency, but like I said, this is a summary, and those Q4 reports have already been sent to the SBC on Finance.
Okay, do you have any questions, Councillor?
Yeah, I really only had one question. I think it was Councillor Wyatt or whatever. Because I know these reports are vetted. It's how the Winnipeg Police Board was created and fits within our organizational structure that we have this. But I think I only have one real question. I mean, the police service budget, I know the police board is diligent on that. How is have you been able to keep the Winnipeg Police Board budget steady
The police
for
board,
this reporting period?
for the police board, yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, for the services, we're talking about 2023 right now. So I don't have any, like the information for 2024 is going to come up in our reports that we report back to you next year. But yeah, the Winnipeg Police Board, we're within our budget.
Smoothly running office, Ms. Kiss. Anyway,
I do have a question though, if you don't mind, is that okay?
you can, sure.
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so my question is, okay, so the quarterly financial reports, which I just spoke to, are provided to SBC on Finance and Economic Development. So why wouldn't these audited summaries of the WPB and WPS be presented as well to the SBC on Finance? I mean, council has delegated that authority for quarterly reports and over expenditures to the SBC on Finance and Economic Development. So why wouldn't this report go through this route? The audited reports are included as appendices to our annual report, and that report does go to council for information through this committee. So
This
it's
committee.
just a question,
Through this committee.
right?
Yes, there certainly is.
Through the bylaws. I know.
Overlap, yes.
Yes.
But because these proceed up to council, they come through this committee, whereas finance simply gets those reports for information, and they stay at that committee. So because it is in the organizational bylaw that police services falls under this committee's jurisdiction, that's why these ones come here.
Oh, yeah, but I'm just saying that then could these, because they are financial, could they not go to Finance and Economic Development as well? Because like I said, it's an appendix to our annual report, so those reports are like, I'm sort of presenting them to you twice, right? It's just a comment.
It's confusing to us counselors too.
Anyways,
Really, it
just
is.
a comment, yeah, so.
We can take that as noted and maybe,
But,
Peter, we can follow up with clerks just to get some clarity.
Ask the clerk again, a question. Technically, these reports are coming here to receive as information as well, right? Same as like the financial ones, same as at the finance committee. But, can the finance committee or can this committee vote no to receiving it as information?
This committee, yes, technically,
We
this
could,
committee
yeah.
can. However, these reports go out to council, so the recommendation would be to not receive it as information.
That's right. So we can do that here, but at finance, they technically can't do that, right?
I mean, technically, they can also choose not to receive it as information. It's just, yeah, it's there for information, so.
Okay.
I guess it's sort of with the establishment of the board, so then it was just how do we get our reports to council? Because we're not an SBC, correct? So coming through here, yeah, so there's no issue with reporting it. It was just a question, because all the other financial reports go to the other SPC.
Yeah, my interest though is, like, I'm not really interested in the financials because I know it's been through a lot of places. But what I do appreciate, this committee was responsible for protection. And that's one of the reasons I was on it. And when we get I guess we'll be getting an updated strategic plan after the new chief is in place or something like that. Anyway, those kind of reports, how things are going, I appreciate it when they do come here, right? So,
Thank you. Appreciate the presentation and we'll get some clarity. But I'm pretty sure that's what it is to get it up to council.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand that, but my question was, could it not go through finance because I guess it still comes through here?
Yeah, we'll get some clarity on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Edie, I think 3, 4, 5.
yeah, I'm gonna do it here, hang on. I move to receive the Winnipeg Police Service statement of revenues and expenditures as information.
All those in favor?
I
Aye, it's carried unanimously.
I move that the Winnipeg Police Board 2023 summary expenditures be received as information. I move the Winnipeg Police Board 2023 annual report be received as information, and as I indicated, Madam Chairperson, that's a report I like to have come here. So,
Agreed. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's carried unanimously. Thank you.
oh, and that's it for
Yeah.
those. Okay.
And we'll move on to item number 6, recreation and leisure infrastructure funding distribution update. I believe we have Senator Sawatki. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Good morning, councillors. Peter, thank you for having me. So this report stems back from the adoption of the Winnipeg Rec Strategy back in May 26, 2022. At that time, we were asked to generate this report on an biannual basis every 2 years. And the report captures the capital funding that has gone through the city's budgets in the previous 8 years. This report will be brought forward on a 2-year cycle. So this report covers the period from 2017 to 2024. And you'll note in the report that overall, during that time period, the total investment in civic recreation assets was $250 million and $91,598. And within that, we were also asked to break out what the funding allocations from various levels of government or partnership funding would be. So of that $250 million, the total amount from the Government of Canada was 55 million and change. The province of Manitoba was just over 96 million, and the city of Winnipeg contributed just over 98 million. So the breakdown on that is the Government of Canada funding represents about 22%, the city of Winnipeg is 39%, and the province of Manitoba is 39%. The report further goes on to detail the funding split out in various ways, just depending on what the reader is interested in knowing. So we show the funding splits by funding source by year over that time period. We also show the funding source by community committee by year. And there is a chart on page 5, table 3 there that actually shows the largest investments in that 8-year period. With the contribution that comes from each level of government. And then just to skip to the very end as the appendix, we've also broken the funding down by asset sort or asset type and the year. And that is followed by Appendix B, which actually lists each individual investment so that you can see where it landed in what year, and it totals up to the 250 million we're talking about. So that's it in a nutshell, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councillor Edie?
That's up to 2023, right?
2024.
What is, okay.
Yeah.
So,
And
so I imagine the community committee with the largest would be the Assiniboia, given the Waverly West Recreation Campus thing.
It is, within this 8-year period, yes, Assiniboia has the largest allocation.
And yeah, also the St. James Civic Center, right, was a major, okay,
Exactly.
yeah, so, okay. So I guess, I'm sure the department and everybody's looking at sort of more evenly distributing it over, like, has to be over time, right?
But I think that's always the challenge of what the 8-year window looks like. You leave out a couple of things, maybe there were some larger investments in other wards a couple of years earlier, but yes, from a departmental perspective, we're trying to balance a number of things. We're trying to balance geography, we're trying to balance asset types, we're trying to balance asset condition, existing neighborhoods, new growth, where we have pressing needs in a facility that is affecting programming.
We have a lot of pressing needs to.
We do, yes, there's quite a large deferred maintenance need in all of our facilities.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Questions.
Good. Yes, Councillor Edie, I think you did note, it was within the 8 years. But there were some significant investments in the prior years, right? That was not quite calculated like the first one. The one that comes to mind is like the aquatic facility out in Transcona. I believe there was.
Yeah, so in
We have-
2013, money was allocated with a little bit more in 2014 for the Transcona Aquatic Park. So it just misses the window that we're talking about at this point.
And then I think outside of that window too was the Seven Oaks Pool indoor spray pad and major
that's-
renovation.
Actually, Seven Oaks does fall within the window. Let me
What
just see
does-
what
what
year
did-
it is. It was a 2017 allocation for the renewal. And then there was some concrete work in 2019.
Well, and then you are
Shouldn't
coming
say
back,
happen, I
yeah,
should
you'll
say
be coming
budget.
back in 2 years, right?
We will be.
Okay, for an updated one. All right. And yeah, I just wanted to note it here, we've done some great job in leveraging other dollars, right? The province and the federal government. So hoping to continue on with those partnerships in the coming years. So
Vex Grounds wouldn't be getting that money if it wasn't for the province.
okay, thank you, Sandra. You're welcome. Great, Councillor Edie.
Oh,
You're my go-to guy.
yeah. Well, I'm going to receive this report as information.
And also the Winnipeg Public Service recommendations.
Yeah, that's what I'm moving, yeah, the recommendations of Winnipeg Public Service.
Okay, perfect. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's carried. All right, moving on to item number 7, alternatives to use Delta Card. I believe this is a request, an extension up to 60 days. We have Dave Donkey from Parks and Jim Berezowski from Public Works to probably speak to this item and the next item, number 8. Great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, thank you.
Thanks, Counselor, and good morning. Yeah, we're looking for an extension of 60 days for the report on Delta Guard. The reason being that we had additional financial review required.
I'm good with this. Is there anything? Can you just give us a general idea? Is there really anything up there?
Oh, there's a bunch of options that we're considering, and it's best just to wait until the report comes forward.
Great. I moved this is an extension for up to 60 days of it.
Pretty good chair is just.
Sorry,
I'm Madam Chair.
go ahead. We
I
just had
believe
to
it's
leave,
up
but
to 60 days. Is that right, Jen? I moved an extension on this report for up to 60 days.
Correct. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that's carried unanimously. All right, item number 8, proactive cleanup of needle debris and weapons. Yeah.
So thank you very much. Yeah, I'll give you a summary of the report. the Director of Public Works has a lot of experience with these matters, so I think it's important that he's here today. And I heard the delegate too, both delegations this morning, which were of interest. So this report basically, we were requested to come back with some policy options and cost implications to clean up debris in Winnipeg, dangerous, hazardous debris in Winnipeg. Currently our level of service is that we have people that are out in parks now doing some work, such as gardening and whatever. And when they see the needles and when they're there at site, they'll pick them up. Not in the report, but we have year-end data now available. There's about 800 needles that were picked up by staff over the last year. Then the report also talks about we respond immediately to 311 requests when we get them, and our park staff will go and clean them. And there's been about 103 needle collections on average throughout the year. Over the last 5 years. So there's significant needles out there, and just confirming that it is a significant concern. And my customers are the people that use the parks for recreation and the play structures and whatnot. Anyways, we came forward with a couple of options. 2 crews to monitor 32 parks. Those parks were in the appendix, and those are the ones that our staff told us where there's significant problems. That's not to say there's not needles found in other parks. There's 1,000 parks in Winnipeg, but those are the ones where they are most concentrated in. And the options that we looked at were just having 2 crews go throughout the summer to clean this up, the summer season, sort of from April to October, or carrying it over winter, having a crew in summer, and trying to hit these, the goal being to hit these 32 sites once a day. Now, the other option talks about, 262,000, keeping it 1 crew over winter. So those 2 crews in summer and 1 crew in winter, for a total cost of $262,000. So it's a significant expense. I have talked to Street Connections about this particular problem, and I think maybe I'll just leave it there for questions at this point.
Okay. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Edie.
Often they can be found in the grass when we're doing the grass cutting in our parks. I notice sometimes they don't clean up the litter first. They just basically get mulched straight. And some of the cases I know of, but before cutting grass, is there a crew that sort of goes visually over to make sure there's no sharps that could get fired off?
The crews do litter control before. It's the same guy on the mower that does that work.
They do it.
Yeah, so that's the intention, but they're looking for litter primarily. Needles are hard to see when you're on a mower. One of the problems with any of these options or anything we're discussing, we're not going to get them all. We're just trying to get the majority of them right when we deliver a service like this.
Our Green Team crew, we have them visually go over it before we run the lawnmower.
We don't have
That's how we work it anyway. So,
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we are doing the 32 parks now. So let's talk.
Okay, so the service level is only when we are out there. So if we mow on a cycle of 10 to 14 days or pick weeds on a series of 2 months or 3 months, that's the only time we're not only looking for needles when we do that work. If they happen to do the work and they see them, they will do them. These proposals are talking about getting out there with the goal of every day to these parks. That's kind of what we thought we were asked to do.
Yeah.
And in winter, it might be every couple of days. The other problem is we're not there in the weekends, and that might be a time where there might be more needles generated, I suspect.
Yeah, well, it's sometimes St. John's Park for, so that's the proposal. So the one proposal is how much again?
Yeah, just the summer crews are 193,000 approximately, and then the summer crew in winter, which we would, if you want to do a good job and get it done, the winter work would be important too. I know that the Central Park daycares were concerned. In winter, we won't be out there for months. We don't have the staff that are out there anymore. So our thoughts would be more to go with the second option of having a winter crew proactively looking for these needles too.
Right, that makes sense. I know Champlain School, they use St. John's Park in the winter. Bringing kids into the park for various reasons, so it's interesting. I don't really have many more questions really, but, oh, I did. You said 103. That was 103 initiated going to collect needles, or was that?
That's the number of SRs received, service requests received.
Yeah, 103 requests, right?
Yeah.
And then you gotta go out and attend it, right? All
And
the
you
questions I
had
have.
mentioned, out of those 103, were you able to bring it down to the locations? More of the areas? Do you have that data out of the 103 SRs or average 103 SRs?
We have, data that's, I would call it unverified data that does support. A lot of these are, one way or the other, they're more in the north end of the city, like what we call the North Parks area, which is north of the Assiniboine and west of the Red River.
And then kind of on a move forward basis, depending on where this lands, when people still call into 311, who still picks up the needles when the calls do come in at 311?
Our staff will go out and pick them up.
Okay. And then your ongoing conversation with Street Connections about distribution and needle exchange, where you kind of touched lightly on that. What were those conversations again?
I throughout the question, and it's not in the report, but, I did have a conversation with the manager of Street Connections. What about the city paying for a portion or paying for all of this service? And her response is that I would have to discuss that with my director. Obviously this is a bigger social issue than more than just about needles and parks. So it really transcends even more than what Public Works does really at the end of the day.
Nails are everywhere.
Okay.
I did have another question. So in the past, Street Connections, I think, do we have a conversation with installing those needle deposit boxes or whatever? I know we were talking about adding more in our parks. Did we actually do that?
We have approximately 9 or 10 of those boxes. I think it's 9 boxes in the parks altogether. The public service initiated that themselves to see if they would be effective at collecting needles. We had subsequently found out they weren't really effective. Not a lot were picked up, but one more needle picked up off that isn't on the ground is a better needle that's picked up. So we've managed to maintain those boxes. There are also another collection boxes that Street Connections has through its various partner organizations throughout the city. I think there's another dozen of them or so.
Yeah, there's others, okay.
I think that was written in the report to Councillor Edie.
Yeah.
Yeah, page 5 about the 12 that are in Streets Connections.
But you had moved those boxes to different locations due to the complaints from area daycare saying, they were, did you not receive complaints from?
So at the Central Park location, we moved the location. I believe we moved the location in the park. And if we didn't, we did sign it very clearly about what, because one of the suggestions was that it's not signed, not clearly signed. So we did put a sign on that. We got to try whatever we can try. The number of needles found in the box did not significantly increase with the sign.
Go ahead, Councilor Edy, sorry I put you up there.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment, like, so when budget time comes around, I remember they were saying, well, the numbers are down with kids at waiting pools in some parks. Well, I wonder why they're down, right? Maybe it is, you know, who pays for it. The point is that the people of Winnipeg pay their property taxes and everything. They want to have parks that they can use for their kids and for themselves, right? So, anyway, I just wanted to make that comment, but I don't know if parks and open space, you don't really measure how many people are using the park unless, like, if there's a waiting pool, then somebody's our community services are monitoring that, right? But do you have statistical numbers, Jim, or?
While you're referring to waiting pools,
Well, no. I'm talking about outside of community services assets.
Yeah, we've only.
Do you have any idea about like general park usage?
No, we don't. And that's something that we've been the park strategy talks about us doing that. In other words, measuring the demand for parks. We're just starting now to put some counters in some of the parks for people. And we're considering some big projects like using big data to try and figure out how many people use parks. But both those are only in their infancy right now.
Councilor Edy, do you have any other questions? I don't have any other questions.
Oh, not really of the public service at this point. I will have a question, Madam Speaker, about adding something in here to have EPC and the mayor communicate the street connections to go back to what that gentleman was talking about, asking them to go back to an exchange of 1-to-1 in order to, and then we wouldn't necessarily have to be dealing as much with this Neil problem.
So we wouldn't receive it as information is what you're stating. You want to direct, how are you going to word it?
Well, it's not directing the public service.
Right.
We need to write a letter to we need to communicate to the provincial government that the harm reduction program needs to somehow put a value on old needles so that they get turned back in, right? So, yeah.
I don't know, how do we do that?
So that would be a recommendation up to council through EPC. And the recommendation would be that the province be requested to reevaluate a program for using needle pickup.
so through the chair, you would also receive this report as information and subsequently.
I don't know, maybe I'll move it to the budget.
Well, you got two options here.
I'll wait for the guidance from Madam Speaker or the Madam Chairperson on that as well, because I'm not sure where you guys are at with your
Well, we were
process.
hoping to receive it as information, have continuous discussions with Manitoba Health and the harm reduction folks out there on a long-term solution such as a needle exchange and to ensure that they stay out of public spaces. So I don't know if that's a direction or if you.
I
Right
just
now,
want to make a
believe in this-
recommendation, and if EPC concurs with it, it'll fall through, right?
Yeah,
I just want to make it clear, I think that gentleman who comes from the street, a drug user, was back there in the day when it was a 1-for-1 and it was difficult, but the point is it was 1-for-1, there was a value. Now there's nothing, right? So the users are getting their harm reduction, but they're potentially causing harm to others, right? So they have to take some responsibility. I agree with them. You have rights and responsibilities, Madam Chairperson.
we got there, Peter.
So understanding the motion that the SBC on Community Services recommend to council that the province of Manitoba be requested to put in place a needle exchange program within the city of Winnipeg to encourage the collection of used needles.
Yeah, well, putting a value on used needles, just put it that way.
Okay.
And that's going to EPC, but then how does that work? Peter, I know we've directed EPC some motions like, where it's wording where we ask the province of Manitoba and that has to go all the way up to council.
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so this would be a recommendation. This committee cannot direct the EPC to do anything.
We're just making a recommendation.
And if council does concur in this recommendation, then it would be a request to the province of Manitoba.
okay, and then who would issue that letter? Would that be from the mayor's office? How does that?
Governmental affairs, it's in the mayor's office. Is it?
Well, generally, if council approves something of this nature, then we would draft a letter and send it along.
And then walk me through what happens if EPC does not concur in the recommendation? Does it just die there?
Then that recommendation would still proceed to council, but with whatever EPC then recommends.
Or should we receive it as information?
That's right.
Okay. Okay,
I think, so this is a second, so I'm moving to receive this report as information and make the recommendation to EPC and council with Peter read.
right. We'll have a difficult discussion at EPC. Thank you, Peter. All those in favor? That's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And then to consider this last item, I'll just require suspension of the rules.
Okay, Peter, Counselor Edie, we need to suspend the rules to hear an addendum report, a budget referral on wading pool decommissioning.
What, sorry?
Budget referral, wading pool decommissioning.
Oh.
That was.
This is your, okay,
Gilroy's.
okay, I moved the suspension rules in.
I believe she moved it at council.
City Center.
City Center, okay.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, that's carried. And I believe we have people from the public service here to kind of walk us through the addendum. We have Sandra Sawatsky and the Chair of Community Services, Cindy Fernandez. Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for coming and staying back.
Sure, no problem. So what I understand this referral, from City Center Community Committee is that further to council's adoption of the wading pool rationalization and spray pad reinvestment strategy, where included in that strategy is on average about $40,000 per spray, $40,000 per wading pool for demolition and sodding. So, I mean, the price for each wading pool to be demolished could range, but on average it's $40,000. So that has been included within the spray pad reinvestment strategy. But what this motion here is to ask for funds. I guess this would need to be a referral to the 2025 budget process, that $60,000 be added for each wading pool decommission to do some type of amenity instead of just the demolition and sodding. So at the time that it was approved by council, there was no funds available to add the amenities. So it was, the deal was, or what was approved, I should say the deal, but it was, it was a spray pad investment strategy. So in order to get the spray pad amenity, there would be anywhere from, 0 to 3 wading pools being decommissioned in order to provide that new amenity, which being the spray pad. And that the wading pools would be demolished and sodded only. So this is a recommendation from City Center Community to add funds to create some type of amenity rather than just the sodding.
Some towards. There is a limited counselor available. funds, which are gonna start to disappear with our new zoning changes. Now, that motion is only the waiting pools. I think they missed the point about the decommissioning of buildings associated with the waiting pool, right?
Well, I believe that the $40,000 on average that was allocated would include the demolition of any of the pool buildings that would have been there. So that's what I'm saying. In some cases, maybe the demolition might be 20,000, but in others it might be like 60 or 70. So it
Right.
kind of depends on the site.
Yeah, but that's,
Right.
have a building I don't wanna lose. The waiting pool is okay to go, but the building is still used, for things aside from waiting pools. Anyway,
Councilor Eddie, maybe we can take that particular one offline if you wanted to talk about.
I still
whether
wanna,
it's-
I asked for some, actually, might have got lost in whatever, but I did ask for some information about what it would take to, do that, but we'll talk about that offline, yeah. I mean, the waiting pools, I went to the community, they were all good, a pool on school division land, they want something else, but they're gonna have to help raise money. Stuff like that, so 50,000
60 is what. this
on
is.
average, that would be on average, right? I think I heard, one of the movers of this motion was talking about like, I think at Clara Hughes where we decommission a waiting pool. I mean, there's a play structure, we got a little extra money from somebody else, but so 50,000 isn't gonna get much either, right? Like,
The motion
we're
is
talking
for
about a
60.
$250,000 sometimes, right?
Yeah, agreed. I'm not sure what you can really get for 60, but maybe Sandra, with her asset experience, can explain what you get for 60.
I don't actually know. I would need to work with our parks folks to figure it out, but I think Councillor Edie's point is well taken. How this has typically happened in the past is public services work with the area councillor and taking in mind what our needs are, what the community's perspective is, come up with what is a viable replacement amenity, and it varies. In some cases, it can be trees and benches and pathways, in other cases, it could be play structure, and so the price varies considerably amongst those things as well.
And I think also, to your point, Sandra, you mentioned that when we did the strategy back in, I believe in 2020, you would also be looking at other areas in kind of close conjunction, other parks, because there could be, you know, a play structure that is a couple meters away from the waiting pool. So it's not necessarily that waiting pool that's going to get decommissioned. A new play structure is needed in that community. So having that consultation with the area councillor who does know best is pretty important, and I think you have stated there. I think the $40,000 average is to be what municipal accommodations had reiterated was a good number across the board, but it fluctuates, right, depending on the site. Okay. And then I think you also have that target level service too chart that you guys follow as well. Can you help remind me again, that target level service chart that you guys had developed that looks at the waiting pools?
So there's a number of different factors in it, one of them being distance to the next nearest waiting pool or spray pad. So we're usually trying to achieve a 2-kilometer radius for a new spray pad. With the exception being if it's in an area of high poverty, then we're dropping that distance down to 1 kilometer. Existing waiting pools right now are assumed to have a 1 kilometer catchment distance. And then within it, we're also looking at what is the condition of the facilities, kind of rattled off the top of my head. Condition of facilities, other amenities that are nearby. Distance, what am I missing? Something. Yeah, I can't remember, but we can opportunities to decommission and then at the bottom of the chart, it also talks about the opportunities for replacement amenities. Like if there's something else that can go into a park that provides value in the community.
And then I think too, in the next, our multi-year budget where you had outlined, the different projects. It's not necessarily, and I think I remember correctly, not all neighborhoods are getting a 3-to-1. It's like 3 decommissioned. There's actually some 1-to-1, some 2-to-1. So, and that investment with the spray pad is closer to upwards to about $1 million. Is that correct?
If not more.
If not more?
Yeah, we're actually finding that depending on the site, depending on the water and sewer connections, there can be considerable additional costs that we need to factor in to make sure that we're dealing with land drainage and meeting the water and waste requirements. So the last batch of wading pools that are under construction, or spray pads, sorry, that are under construction right now are all sort of right at that 1 million or higher mark. And as we go forward, I expect that we'll see some cost escalation in the program.
Madam Chairperson, I was also going to point out, I did point out the Clara Hughes Park, wading pool. The original proposition there was 3 wading pools. What ended up happening is only 1 wading pool, was decommissioned. So,
Yeah, and I think ongoing-
circumstances are different everywhere, right?
Yeah. And again, like policies can change through the counselor, ward counselor. We've seen it before, and further discussion can always happen. We're just starting off with the program now, and I think it's a bit of a sticker shock for everybody when they realize we approved this policy in 2020, but now we're actually implementing it 4 years later. And I think people are kind of in a shock right now, but I think we're doing some good investments down the road, and ongoing dialogue, I think, would be very important, kind of moving forward. Mm-hmm.
Madam Chairperson, I'm of the inclination to move the recommendation of this motion to the budget for 2025. You can find the money, please do.
Okay, so
I know community services could use one. They're not opposed to that. So.
All right, so you move budget referral to the.
That's what they're asking on this motion, isn't it? Yeah. 50,000.
No, they're just adding it to the budget. It's just directing. Oh no, be referred to the 2025 budget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to move that on behalf of the members of.
I believe the director has something to say.
Oh, sorry.
No. Okay. All right, so motion is to refer the $60,000 to the 2025 budget process. Okay,
So moved.
all right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and that's carried. Thank you for sticking around. Right, any new business, Councilor Edie? Oh,
I know it's in public. Can I, our meeting's almost over. Can I talk to you about that situation? Okay.
right, since there's no new business, so ask for an adjournment.
I move adjournment.
Okay, all those in favor?
Uh,
That's carried. Thank you.